Let's talk Mod C though. This is the rubric. Yeah, there is this point. I just want to quickly point this out. I forgot that I added this. So students may revisit prescribed text from other modules to enhance their experiences of quality writing. So if you wanted to, it's may. Keyword here is may. But if you wanted to, you could bring up, like if you studied Eliot, you could bring up Eliot in your reflection as like an influential text for your prescribed text, but it's up to you. So you're strengthening, extending your knowledge and your skills as writers. There's so much going on here, but again, they can ask you creative, discursive, or persuasive. Yeah, you guys have already met Mod C, and you're reading a range of texts. So let's just do some revision on Mod C. We're going to talk about creative choices, influences, and processes, then analyzing technical features and crafts in text, and then just composing it. I want to have a chat in the live chat about whether you guys are doing discursive or creative, but completely up to you. Personally, I did creative. I did try with discursive because I did public speaking during school, and I feel like discursive's kind of like suited that, but I feel like creative just suited me more. So let's say you've got, we're going to talk about reflections, because reflections and technical features are so important. You want to make sure that your creative, discursive, or persuasive has so many techniques. It needs to be like a technique galore. Like you want to be able to go through your thing and like every single line, like even if it's just something like an exclamation mark in one, and then it's a metaphor in another, and it's repetition in that. Like you want to make sure that it's just like filled. And in saying that, I just said that and I was like, don't say that, because you don't want it to like just be this complete jumble. Of course you want it to be concise and flow, but you want it to sound like a creative piece. Like, you know, when you read an exemplar creative and you're just like, this sounds so good, like that's the goal. That's the goal, for it just to be like how do you write? Like it's so beautiful, everything just flows, it's just so smart. For creative writing, I swear off of Pinterest. Go into Pinterest. If you're writing a creative piece, go into Pinterest, search up whatever theme you're writing about. So if you're writing about disconnection, if you're writing about isolation, if you're writing about, I don't know, redemption, self-discovery, growth, whatever it is, put in growth poem, disconnected poem, feeling lonely poem. You will read some of the craziest lines ever, and they're also really short. Like a lot of people are like, oh, you should read more to get better at Mod C. Do you have time in year 12? Do you have time in the next month before trials to start, you know, all of a sudden I'm going to pick up all these books and just read in this really stressful month in my life? Realistically, it's not going to happen, but taking 5 minutes and saving some like quotes on Pinterest and just getting some inspiration, it's going to do the trick. It's going to do the trick. I forgot to go through that. But this is how you can incorporate technical features, because the more features you have in your text, not only are you going to get a higher mark for it, but in the reflection there is more to talk about, which is so important. And you really want to be able to analyze it. So this is just an example. In your reflection, you are going to be using first person. I remember mentioning that before, where it's like, my piece utilizes this, and I do have some sentence starters that you guys can use from that. Let's talk about what a discursive is, because I feel like I honestly did not, even though I had written a discursive, I feel like I didn't know until trials. It's exploring an idea or like a variety of topics, but it's a discussion. Like, do you guys remember primary, when you learn a persuasive text, you're always like trying to prove it, but a discussion is proving both sides. You're kind of going into both sides of it, and you're not forcing them or like persuading them into a single point of view. You can like imply it indirectly, but that's not your intention. Like, you're not writing the discursive to prove, I don't know, that social media is horrible. It's not the must. I always think like TED Talks are literal discursives, because you don't really watch a lot of TED Talks and they're trying to shove this thing down your throat. They just kind of inspire that insight and that thought and that perspective. Some of the techniques, if you are writing a discursive, anecdotes, humor, imagery, extended metaphors, and irony, and then experimenting with form, like having like one line and then having a really long part, and then like 2 lines, like going back and forth with form and structure. But yeah, I feel like a lot more people are doing discursives rather than when it started. But yeah, my only thing with discursives is I really recommend writing about a broad topic. Like, if you're gonna write about discursives, write about disconnection, write about self-discovery, write about agencies. Like even if you're talking about technology, make a link to identity, or make a link to autonomy, or make a link to human connection, and just some of those big like human experiences that we were talking about in common mod, because a lot of the time that's what comes up in the stimulus. That's what's coming up in the stimulus. So these are just some of the features that they can use, and we just kind of spoke about them now, where you're using like really engaging imagery. It can be open-ended, the resolution, or it can be reflective. It's up to you if you want to kind of have that ambiguous ending. It's mainly using first person, but it can use third person. And these are just the different types of kind of books that you can use for the different texts. So let's say you like your topic was books, and your kind of theme was books. As an imaginatives, I could talk about like a talking book, or like books as like a metaphor for like a character's life, and like the book of the character's life. If it was a discursive, I'd talk about the role of books in education, the diversity of books, the growing competition between paper books and electronic books. So I'm not proving anything. Persuasive is paper books versus ebooks. I'm proving it. Persuasive, I'm proving books are integral in the education system. But discursive, I'm showing that role, and I'm not directly telling them books are a must in the education system, but you're giving them just that kind of fuel to perceive it and to start questioning it. And then informative is where you're physically informing them. So that's the difference between them. Again, imaginative and discursive are the two most popular. Imaginative is the most popular. What I will say, guys, is that although you do, most of the time, you're going to get a choice between imaginative and discursive. I think it was the 2020 HSC. One of the past HSC papers solely gave 20-mark creative. Like it was only creative. And the module, when you look at it itself, is more suited to creative writing than it is discursive. That doesn't mean don't bother with the discursive, but I think that if you have a discursive, just have a backup creative just in case. I think it's rare that it happens, but it did happen in the HSC. And a lot of the trial writers are using the HSC because trials is supposed to try and mimic HSC as much as possible. A lot of them might see that and be like, oh, let's try that. So you don't know. Again, be prepared for it. And that's why I say that, because not to scare, I don't like saying like these rare situations because I don't want to scare anyone. I really don't. It's not my intention. Like I hate making people feel like that. But just in case, I think just, or even have a discursive that you can turn into a creative and that they kind of like borderline. I don't know. Just to be ready for it. Effective writing is having a strong kind of like concept, or if you're doing a discursive, a strong thesis, very deliberate structure. Your structure has to be very, very deliberate. I know a lot of people will go like the general, like it starts all happy, you've got like the complication and like, oh, here's a resolution, but you don't have to use that. You want to use clever but sparring use of techniques. So in saying that, you don't want to do like, here's like 5 metaphors in one paragraph, then let me use simile every single time in this next section, and then the end I'm just going to use repetition or repeat. Like you want to like sparingly use them and kind of like spread them out, but still be using a lot of them. Simple plot is always going to do the trick. Do not think that you need this super crazy plot that's going to blow everyone away and is the most life transforming story. You don't need it. You don't need it. And having an extra twist. It's up to you guys for writing your piece. If you are doing a creative, if you want to use your class one, or if you want to write a new one. I know my class one, I got a 17 in it, like in my internal, and it wasn't that I was upset with that. Like for mod C, I was like, this is mad. I was like, I'm more proud of this than my higher marks for the other modules, because mod C is like not my vibe and caused multiple breakdowns. But in saying that, I saw the feedback for my text and I was like, I really just want to write my own and just try writing out a new one. And then that new one ended up doing better. So it's completely up to you, and don't think that you don't have time to write a new one. You 100% do have time to write a new one if you wanted to. If you are writing a new one, you can generate ideas from like different movies that you've watched, or like a book that you've read, or again, go into Pinterest and get some inspiration. You can also search up writing prompts online. I feel like I did that a couple times just to try and get some different ideas. But writing about yourself. Now, in saying that, do not trauma dump too much. I say too much. I can't even say don't trauma dump at all, because like, let's say you journal, or if you just sit and like you write about like your feelings at like this one birthday party or like this one event in your life. A lot of those feelings you can then use to give to your character, but you don't want to use it as like I hate my brother and my sister for what they've done, or like I hate like my ex-best friend. Like you don't want it to be like that. You don't want to be trauma dumping. But I think that reflecting on your own experiences a lot of the time reduces the possibility of cliche because they're your own emotions. I think it's very hard, and this is a mistake that I made with my first text. I was writing a lot about like it was a really like mentally dark piece because I feel like that's all we watch on TV. Like I feel like so many people, I don't know if you guys have found this as well, but all my friends and I were writing such heavy stories about like mental health and just dark topics and like betrayal and trauma, like all these really heavy stories. But realistically, that's all we're watching on TV. Like all we're watching, and like all the music, like a lot of the stuff that we consume is like heavier stuff and like these really like intense plot lines, but you don't need it. And that was the difference that I made when I rewrote my text and I wrote a new one. I just wrote like a nice story. Like it's fine to write something light. Like it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be such a sad story. But in saying that, because I was writing about a really mentally dark topic that I hadn't actually experienced, I had just imagined what it experienced like. So a lot of my metaphors and my figurative language was really just cliche because I was just like, oh, I can imagine that someone like going through this would feel like this, but I had never been through it. And then when I wrote a lighter story, and it was like my story was like about writing a letter to your past self, and just a bit about like validation and high expectations on yourself, which was something that I was feeling at the time, and I used my own feelings to write about it. I ended up getting the better mark, and my teachers were so happy with that in comparison to my first one, and were like, thank God, like you wrote a second one. But I realized that was because I was using my own experiences. And because I was using my own experiences, my own feelings, they were, first of all, easier to write about, quicker to write, but also just a lot more authentic. My voice as like a narrator, but I was also the main character. So basically just make yourself the character of your story if you're struggling. I think it's such a good thing. But in saying that, do not trauma dump. This is not the spot. This is not therapy. This is not therapy, but you can put yourself or talk about a time in your life, and you can even like change the ending, like if you don't want to make it too much about you. I just feel like it's easier to write if you're struggling with mod C. Writing about yourself can really help out. These are different places that you can get ideas, personal experiences, writing prompts, watch a TV show, get going. You can use your favorite locations, write from your favorite character's perspective. Guys, you can do so many different things, like a family history or a family holiday or an object, or make like a metaphor out of something. You can literally write about anything, just as long as it's got like a good plot. It doesn't have to be super like crazy. Realistically, I don't recommend crazy plots, only because it's very hard to get into it. Especially if you only get a 10 marker, which you have to be prepared for. Write a first draft. This is what I do. If you are rewriting it, or if you are like perfecting it, use your first draft, let it be terrible. Like I seriously would set a 30-minute timer, and I was like, just write. Like I don't care how bad it is, just have something. And then come back to it, like give time. You're going to read it over again and think like, this isn't right. Like, how am I that bad? But then you can spend time revising it. You can cut out cliches, telling and not showing, which is the biggest thing. That is like the number one feedback in creative writing and in discursive writing, that you're just telling it and you're not showing it. The only way to show it is to add techniques and to write figuratively in that sense, where I'm not saying like, oh, I feel horrible today. I'm saying the rain resembles the state of mind, like whatever. You can stand out by experimenting with form. So that was something that I did. I did a letter for mine, and I had like a letter extract. Or you can do like fragmentation. You can do like a non-linear timeline. You can go back and forth. And this is like with unique narrative voice as well, where you can have like an unreliable narrator, have like an unlikable protagonist that like your marker hates. You can like have past tense and present tense, so start with a memory or flashback and then go back, or maybe like all of it's written in the present and then like all of it's written in the past and it goes back to present, like whatever. I think stuff like that really makes you stand out, even if it is a simple story. This is an example from the 2019 HSC. So they've got twice before a book had turned him inside out and altered who he was, had blasted apart his assumptions about the world and thrust him onto a new ground where everything in the world suddenly looked different and would remain different for the rest of time, for as long as he himself went on living in time and occupied space in the world. Now, this was a 10-mark imaginative, discursive, or persuasive, and then a 10-mark reflection. Even though the stimulus is about a book, you did not physically have to write about a book. You could have put a book into your story that you memorized, or like a piece that you like went in and you kind of like, I know what I kind of want to write about. Or you could do like a metaphorical book, like the book of life. Or you could link it to education, or like anything that books, or like wisdom, like whatever books are a symbol of. You do not have to take the literary meaning. And once you see that, and once you understand that, and that's why it's so important to look at different past stimulus questions, even if you don't sit a full past paper, like it doesn't matter. even if you don't want to sit like 10 past papers, look at 10 past paper questions and just sit and think about them and think, how could I adapt my story to this, both literally and metaphorically, or either or? Because you don't want to go in there and like, oh my gosh, no, I have to write about a book, when you could just, if you had a story about identity and you were switching between maybe your 10-year-old self and your 20-year-old self, then you could talk about like the book of life and like start at like chapter 1 and do like a different type of structure, and then, or chapter 10 and then chapter 20 for their ages. Like, I don't know, you can switch it up, but don't think that you have to take it literally. The yeah, literally. This is the 2020 HSC question I was talking about, guys. Compose a piece of imaginative writing. So it's straight 20 marker and it's only creative. It's not discursive. And this was 2020 HSC, which is why I tell you guys, maybe just if you are going in with a discursive, I know like it's annoying to hear like, oh, like now I have to worry about a creative. Maybe even if you just have like a base idea, or if you just have like one go at writing a draft, or like just something just in case you get this. I think it's rare, but I think it's possible. I think you're much more likely, obviously, to get the option. 100, not 100%. You're a lot more likely to get it, but there is the chance. Like, you can't be sure. And just because they've done it before, good to have it. In saying that, the counter is like, oh, well, if I have a creative, do I need to have a discursive? They haven't done that. Doesn't mean they can't. But will they? A lot less likely. It is more likely that they'll ask for a creative than it is that they'll ask creative only than they'll ask for discursive only. It is good to experiment with both, just for yourself and also for techniques. And a lot of the time, your creative can be turned into a discursive. Or like you can use the same theme or the same message, but just write it like with the discursive techniques of anecdote and humor and imagery. But I personally didn't. I had like in the back of my mind, I was like, if I have to write it out a discursive, like I'll just do it and I'll write it on this topic. And I kind of had like a message, but I didn't memorize anything for it. I had like typed up a draft once, but like I wasn't studying that. I was just kind of like, you know what, if I get that, I'll just be ready for it, just in case, so I don't have to come up with something on the day. But it wasn't something necessarily that I memorized. And you can be the same if you've done discursive. Just have like a backup creative and just kind of thought for it, just so the first time that you write a creative isn't on the day, or like the first time that you think of an idea isn't on the day. Some things are unknowable. A person's secrets may be revealed by the things they leave behind, but what are they? Those supposedly uncovered secrets. They are words, ideas, dry and dead as dust. So you're not required to write out the extract as part of your response. So you can always just imply, like you could just write a whole story about like a secret about a character and not use any of these words. But in saying that, you still can. You can start it with this. You can end it with this. You can take parts of it. But yeah, that's how you do that. And then this is the 2021 HSC. This was my question. And we got a photo. And 10 mark, again, this is the difference where they can give you like 10-10, they give 20 creative, or they give 10-10. They can also do 12-8, or they can do 15-5. They did 15-5 last year. But again, with this photo, let's look at this. So literally looking at this, it's someone trying to escape. And it's like a pencil, so you could talk about writing. Like that's it. But metaphorically, if I wanted to really look into this, and obviously you have to get into teacher mindset when, you know, blue wallpaper shows that like the character is going through depression and is very, very low. But you have to get into that mindset where like everything has meaning, and you have to look at the steps forward. Like they're trying to discover themselves, they're trying to grow, they're also holding the pencil. So like you have that autonomy to take charge of your life and write your own story. You can talk about the shadow of the light and the dark, and you can talk about like light and darkness or dichotomy. You can talk about the barrier and appearance and reality. There's so much you can talk about. But that's just that question. And this was a 2022 HSC, which again, like wild card, like this is why I don't like Mod C, because I feel like they just can do so many different things to you. They gave 15 mark creative or discursive only. And then 5 mark reflection, but it wasn't even a reflection. It was a reflection on the stimulus. So explore how personal fulfillment is expressed by the writer of the stimulus. In your response, make reference to at least one language, device, or stylistic feature in the extract. Which was strange because, like, there's no mention of your prescribed text. There's nothing. Like, it's literally just, like, kind of like a short answer. It's literally like a short answer from, like, paper 1, section 1 out of 5. But, like, mad if you sat it, because that's, like, a very easy 5 marks to get. But yeah, that's just the different ways that they can do it. Now for reflection writing, I do have these just kind of sentence starters that you can use. In terms of memorizing reflection, memorizing creative, it's completely up to you. I Memorizing creatives is hard because you have your piece. Um, like it's hard because you don't know, like, are you gonna get a 20 marker? Are you gonna get a 10 marker? Are you gonna get 15 marker? Are you gonna get a 12 marker? So what I personally did, I had a base story and I was really happy with this story that I wrote, and I used it for trials, and then I used it again for HSC. I had a base, and my base was around 700 words. And then what I did, I copied that and I made a longer version up to 1,000 words, where I just added in like an extra something, like an extra event to my character, like for the plot or like a flashback or something. That made sure that I could fit it in case it was 20 marks. So I was like, okay, if I get 20 marks, I just have to add in this section. And then I took away one section for a 10 marker just in case. And then we ended up getting the 10 marker. So I just knew, no matter how many marks it was, I could use the same story. Now, I know it is risky to go in with only one story and adapt it. But what I did, I had my base story, but I had different versions. Like I always had the same character, but I had like one ending was a happy one ending was an ambiguous one. I had one where there was like a different influence of a family, and the other one was the influence of a friend. Like I just tried to find different ways to switch up the same story. So even though it was the same base, there were so many different versions of it. So there had to be a way to adapt it on the day, and it ended up working perfectly. So that's my advice. I know other people will go in with like 2 or 3 ideas, which I also really recommend, like if you didn't want to stick with one. But personally, just for me, because paper 2 already has so much going on, like I could not do it. I could not. I just felt like having like one base and just knowing like, okay, like if I get a stimulus like this, I'll adapt it like this. And the more different stimuluses that I exposed myself to, the easier it was to then adapt it on the day. You're going to look at your prescribed text and how that influences your form, language techniques, and um your style of writing. So this is like a prescribed text, and we've just got some of the techniques here that like can help like serve your form. So form can go from like the person that you're writing, but also the structure that you're writing from. And then we've got just some more techniques here, just so you guys, when you come back to the slides, if you want to download them, you can just be able to identify that analysis and what that technique does. This is for spotty handed villainous. So you want to look at like what voice Atwood is adopting, because I know a lot of she is one of the most popular prescribed texts for ModC. And some of the techniques that she really uses is first person rhetorical questions, referencing other authors and humor. So that comes up a lot. You want to like imitate and like use the same technique with the same purpose, or you want to use the same technique or a new purpose. So if you're like, okay, Harwood did this to show the reflection of coming of age and in childhood, and then you want to say, I also did this to show the reflection of coming of age in childhood. Like you can do that, or you can say, although Atwood uses a metaphor to reflect the changing attitudes of childhood, I wanted to show the similarities and resonances between them in mind through my own metaphor. So this is how you would imitate it, where you'd use like similarly, and you can kind of make that connection. While if you were transforming it, you'd use a different kind of analysis to transform the use of the form. And this is how you can transform the voice. But the reflection is literally like a short answer mini essay. Like, and you really have to hype yourself up in it. You really do. I recommend using this structure and just kind of making sure that you talk about the aim. So what was your aim in writing the text? Like my aim was to reflect the significance of human connection instead of isolation. I don't know. Your inspiration is your prescribed text. The structure is like, are you using first, second, third person? What's like your plot structured in? Your language is all your techniques. And as you're going through all that, you're evaluating all of that. This is a sample reflection intro. So whilst writing my imaginative short story, The Edge, my aim was to create a text that demonstrates how genuine connections to others brings us meaning and purpose in life. Again, it's using that first person and it's got that aim. And like, I'm creating a text about this message to do so. And then this story specifically was this meaning, and it's got the techniques, characterization, imagery, and monologue. So you'd want some of the main techniques that you're using in your introduction just to show your use of language, which then allows you, and you're having that evaluation here. But I wanted to share this with you guys as well. I also have this on the TikTok. I promise I'm not plugging. I low-key am. These are just some of the sentence starters that you can use and just kind of like familiarize yourself with for your reflection. Realistically, your reflection, the only thing that's really going to, like, if you go in with a prepared story and you do get to use that, then you can memorize quite a bit of it for the reflection as well. For your reflection, you're also just going to add, I was influenced by the stimulus to examine this, and you can add a quote and just make reference to the stimulus as well, just to prove to your marker that you are like engaging with the stimulus. This is for the body paragraph. So my use of the technique here, when I wrote this quote, I've employed this technique in blah blah to evoke this. Just as this author did this, I did this. These are just some good starters, and I recommend having these as you're practicing for trials now, but also just in your study and while you're writing. Just knowing some of these and kind of just whipping them out for your reflection is really going to help you writing. And then this is a conclusion. Your conclusion for your reflection does not need to be more than 2 to 3 sentences. No way. Nothing more. Nothing more. There's no need. You should get most of it in the bulk. Obviously your module essays should be hitting like 3 to 4 plus, but for reflection, just super straight to the point, 2 lines and you're done. And yeah, you want your like prescribed text technique, then the quote, and then the link to their purpose, and then to show how you were influenced by it. It's really just going back and forth. It's just like, I wrote my text, I was influenced by them. You can talk about how you were influenced by them stylistically. So if your prescribed text uses a certain technique, then you'll talk about like that technique and how you were inspired by that technique to use it in your own. Or you can talk about conceptually. So like Harwood talks about like maturity and coming of age. So you can talk about, I was influenced to also examine maturity through this character. And then you can emphasize it differently. But that is all, guys.